They laughed when the frail grandmothers stepped out of the shadows, right until the sky above them began to scream. The three snipers had been holding their position for 48 hours in the ruined remains of what used to be a border village, scanning the valley below through their scopes with the cold precision of men who'd forgotten what mercy looked like. Their target was supposed to be a weapons convoy. What they found instead was an old woman in a faded floral dress, limping through the rubble with a canvas bag slung over her shoulder, looking for all the world like someone's grandmother searching for wild herbs among the stones. The youngest of the three, a cocky marksman named Garrett, adjusted his scope and grinned. "You seeing this?" he muttered into his radio. Little old lady playing house in a war zone. The laughter that crackled back through his earpiece was sharp and cruel. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. What none of them knew, what they couldn't have possibly understood as they tracked her slow, deliberate movements through their crosshairs was that Evelyn Carr hadn't been a civilian in over 40 years. The dress was real. The limp was real. A souvenir from Kandahar that still woke her up some nights. But the canvas bag wasn't filled with herbs or photographs or the harmless belongings of a displaced villager. Inside that bag was a tactical radio, encrypted GPS beacon, and an authorization code that connected directly to NATO's Joint Terminal Attack Controller Network. Evelyn Carr was a retired Air Force combat controller, one of only 12 women who'd ever earned that designation, and she'd volunteered for this mission when every younger operative had called it suicide. She knew they were watching her. She'd known since the moment she crossed into their sight line 20 minutes ago. The slight shift of sunlight off glass on the ridge. The unnatural stillness of three particular shadows that didn't move with the wind. Evelyn had been tracking enemy positions since before these boys were born, and she recognized the arrogance of snipers who thought they owned the high ground. She kept walking, kept up the act, let them think she was helpless. Because helpless, old women don't carry laser designators in their bags. Helpless old women don't have F-35s holding at 30,000 feet, waiting for her signal. The valley air was heavy with dust and the metallic smell of recent shelling. Each step sent tiny pebbles skittering across broken pavement. The only sound for miles, except for the distant rumble that might have been thunder or might have been something worse. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, but her hand stayed steady as she reached into her bag, fingers finding the compact radio by muscle memory alone. She'd done this dance before, in places whose names were still classified, but never at 73 years old, never with knees that protested every step and eyes. That needed reading glasses she'd left behind for this mission. Hawk 7. "This is ground 1, she whispered into the radio, her voice barely a breath. "I have eyes on 3 hostiles, ridge position, November whiskey. They've got the convoy route locked down. I'm painting the target now." 30,000 feet above, Captain Rachel Torres banked her F-35 Lightning into a lazy circle, her heads up. Display suddenly alive with incoming data. The laser designation bloomed on her screen like a flower opening, precise coordinates transmitted from the ground below. "Ground 1, Hawk 7 has your paint," she responded, her voice calm despite the adrenaline starting to spike. "Confirm authorization for strike." Back on the ground, Garrett's smile was fading. Something about the old woman's posture had changed. She'd stopped moving, stopped pretending to search through rubble. Now she stood perfectly still, and there was something in the way she held herself, something in the absolute certainty of her stance, that made his finger freeze on the trigger. "Hey," he said quietly, "something's wrong." Evelyn pulled the laser designator from her bag with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd performed the action 10,000 times in training and 100 times in combat. The device was no bigger than a large smartphone, matte black, and unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what it could do. She aimed it at the ridge, at the exact cluster of rocks where she knew they were hiding, and pressed the activation stud. An invisible beam of light, visible only to the sophisticated sensors of an incoming fighter jet, touched the ridge like the finger of God marking a target for judgment. "Authorization Bravo Delta 7 November, Evelyn said, her voice steady as stone, weapons free. The change in air pressure came first. A shift so subtle that Evelyn felt it more than heard it, the way you feel a subway train approaching through your feet before you see it. Then came the sound, a rising shriek that started somewhere beyond hearing and built into a roar that made. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath. The F-35 dropped out of its holding pattern like a hawk stooping on prey. Sensors locked, weapons armed, pilots' hands steady on controls as she brought $20 million of American military technology to bear on three men who had made the fatal mistake of underestimating a grandmother in a floral dress. Garrett saw it through his scope, a dark shape cutting through clouds, and the blood drained from his face. Contact. Air contact. He screamed, abandoning his position, scrambling backward over rocks as his partners did the same. But you don't outrun an F-35. You don't hide from weapons guided by laser light that knows exactly where you are. The first missile separated from the aircraft's weapons bay with a sound like thunder being born. And Garrett had exactly 3 seconds to understand how catastrophically wrong everything had gone. The explosion lifted dust half a mile into the air, a rolling wave of force and fire that consumed the ridge position like it had never existed. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition cooked off, smaller blooms of orange and black against the gray sky. Evelyn stood in the valley and watched, her face expressionless, as the radio crackled with confirmation. Ground 1, Hawk 7. Target destroyed. Do you require additional support? Negative, Hawk 7. Evelyn replied quietly. Target is down. Convoy route is clear. Good shooting. Ma'am, Captain Torres said, and there was something in her voice that might have been awe. It was an honor. The convoy rolled through 2 hours later. 12 trucks carrying medical supplies and food for villages cut off by the conflict. Drivers who would never know how close they'd come to ambush. How many lives hung on the actions of one old woman who refused to be what she appeared to be? Evelyn was sitting on a chunk of concrete when they passed, her bag at her feet, looking for all the world like a tired grandmother resting her legs. The convoy commander stopped, offered her water and a ride to safety. She accepted both with a gentle smile that revealed nothing about the radio still warm in her bag, or the coordinates still burning in her memory that night. In debriefing rooms half a world away, analysts would mark the mission as successful, with clinical precision noting the elimination of hostile forces and the safe passage of humanitarian aid. But they couldn't measure what mattered, couldn't quantify the moment when 3 men learned too late that the most dangerous weapon isn't always the one you can see. They couldn't calculate the value of experience, the weight of service, the unshakable resolve of someone who'd spent a lifetime proving she belonged in rooms and on battlefields that tried to keep her out. Evelyn Carr went home 3 days later, returned to her quiet apartment with its photos of grandchildren and garden that needed tending. And nobody who saw her buying groceries or walking her dog would have guessed what lived behind those kind eyes. She didn't talk about the mission. She didn't need to. The convoy had made it through. The supplies had reached people who needed them. Sometimes that was enough. That quiet knowledge that you'd done something that mattered, that your skills and your courage still had value even when the world wanted to put you on a shelf marked retired. Because strength doesn't always announce itself with youth and muscle. Sometimes it comes in a floral dress and carries a lifetime of training in a canvas bag. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the valley is the one everyone underestimated. The one who knows exactly what she's capable of and needs no permission to prove it. And sometimes, when snipers laugh at a tiny old woman, the sky itself comes down to teach them better. If this story reminded you that heroism has no age limit, that service and sacrifice don't retire just because the uniform comes off, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me about someone in your life who proved they were stronger than anyone expected. And remember, never judge someone by what you see on the surface. You have no idea what thunder they might call down.